Okay, so here's an introduction to political theory as is in the light of the United States, right? Um, let's go into it. So this is the first part of it. I started reading political theory in 2008 and stuff. Not much has generally changed. Things have been pretty cyclical, um, for the most part. So I was right about that too. Um, but let's just go into it. Um, so here we have liberalism and stuff, one of the most bashed ideologies and stuff in the United States. Um, Liberals recently got trounced, smashed, and stuff, not only because they wouldn't get involved with voting for some reason and stuff, but because, well, revenge, basically. For, yeah. Anyway, so what is liberalism made of? It's, the ideas of Friedrich Hayek, Voltaire, and so Voltaire is very important because he makes you think about the importance of free speech and stuff. Jeremy Bentham, Thomas Paine, John Stuart Mill, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Montesquieu, stuff. Thomas Hobbes is great. Okay, he's basically Thomas Paine is great and stuff. He's basically part of the foundation of the United States, basically setting the rational argument for why the United States needed to secede from the United Kingdom using some very clear, hard logic. Um, he was he was kind of, in that sense, he was kind of a savior in his time and stuff. So you want to knock liberals? Well, one of them basically helped build America. Um, Liberalism has strong roots in ancient Greek philosophy. You know, it's basically, as in its theory and stuff, it's the ideology of reason, science, reform, equality under the law, understanding social welfare, enlightenment values, yada yada. Um, it has a systematic study of happiness and stuff, which is mainly done by John Stuart Mill. So, um, John Stuart Mill is important because his work kind of builds the foundation for game theory and stuff as well too, which is cool. Yeah. So, um, however, drawbacks. Liberals also feature Adam Smith and stuff. His ideas are old for another time and place, before big industrial supply chains and complex administrations and all these new details that came in and stuff. Okay. His ideas don't apply to the here and now. Now meaning at most 15 years ago to 15 years in the future. So that's the relevant political time frame, basically, in terms of how policies are effective and stuff. After that point, you can't say something is because of a certain policy, really, because so many other things come to work in there too. Um, so all right, so liberalism is related to right libertarianism through Adam Smith and stuff, because liberalism, I mean, I'm not going to say liberalism tried to get its way into economics. It did, but it didn't and stuff. At the point for Adam Smith and stuff, Adam Smith, I guess, was speaking from an administrative position. Um, but yeah, but going to right libertarianism and stuff, it's not really what Americans want and stuff. It tends to be associated with things that are just not acceptable. Um, and that's fine. Uh, this is basically, you can think of this as like the ideology of privately run civilization, commercialism, and other garbage, basically. You know, like, oh, there's no government to protect all of you and stuff, to guarantee your rights. You're on your own. Congratulations. Yeah, you don't want a privately run civilization. It's been tried before. It's not pretty. Um, Liberals also have Johann Goethe and stuff, a polymath, studied damn near every fundamental subject. So, but he was also a staunch conservative. He, yeah, he hated. He had a lot of hate for. Um, he might have had a lot of hate for people less economically fortunate than him and stuff. He was a wealthy person. He kind of had that affluenza and stuff, which tends to pervade the next area. What we're going to call is called next area we're going to go to is just called conservatism and stuff. The part of the right-wing ideologies, right? Um, you can think of conservatism as the ideology of maintenance, keeping things the same, classism, calling liberalism left-wing, heinous crime, repeating past ideas, driving them backwards, etc. That's basically what it is. And which its key thinkers are, again, Goethe and stuff. I don't think Goethe has said much about political philosophy in terms of conservatism. I'll have to look at that again. Joseph de Maistre, Edmund Burke, and Russell Kirk. Okay. Yeah. Uh, right-wing political organizations commit way more crime than all of the other ones. Okay. Way more. Now, going all the way to the political left and stuff, which is on the right side of this, you have Marxism, which has its roots in Mazdakism. And so Mazdakism is the earliest, most proto-evolutionary form of leftism. You know, Marxism has key thinkers of Karl Marx and as well too. Karl Marx was really the catalyst and stuff, responsible for like the 9-to-5 work system and unions and stuff like that. Socialism is not what people really want. It's repeatedly failed throughout history and stuff. It's a highly centralized system and stuff. It leads to communism. You can think of this as the ideology of economic cooperation, freedom from religion, the removal of class, etc., and stuff. But when you breed this with liberalism, you get mixed economics, like scientific socialism, etc., time-tested and rationally valid. Say what you want about mixed economics, which is basically what the United States has right now, and I guess mixed social policy and stuff. But this is where we are now, and not every policy is correct and stuff. What determines a correct policy? It's interesting. We can think of it in two ways. We can think of the statistical positioning and stuff. We can think of the result and stuff, how we want things to be, and the good policies can be considered generative and stuff of value and stuff. But if that value is not appreciated by people, it's not going to have the result that you think it's going to have. So there's that, for starters, for one of many criteria. Policy formulation requires a lot more time that can be given in a lecturing context for a first part of a whole series and stuff of lessons. A lot of our mixed economics is influenced by think tanks and mass media and stuff. Not all of the think tanks are legitimate, okay? One or two of them are fraudsters, just straight up liars, destructive and stuff. The amount of political terrorism, economic terrorism that's prevalent in the United States, largely because of these two and stuff, and sometimes this is because of those think tanks. People who are sometimes just well-meaning and stuff. You know what? Yeah. Now, let's go back to liberalism for a second. Liberalism isn't always the best on the topic of religion and stuff. It kind of overlooks the religious theory as kind of like just always wrong and stuff. Historically, it was. That's the thing. It was. People reading these made-up translations of the Bible and stuff and everything, and these old rigid institutions and stuff, these romanticized traditional institutions and whatnot. It's dehumanizing, and it's perverting and stuff. Yeah, a lot of those institutions were built on lies and misconceptions and irresponsibility. And so, yeah, on some things, liberalism is wrong. It just is. And so, liberalism was made for another time and place. All of these were made for another time and place. But that's why we have more scientific ways of looking at it and stuff. the pragmatic scientific way works and stuff, um, the believe it or not, the compassionate way works and stuff in terms of governance. Um, the uh, but leaders also have to be able to make the hard and tough calls too. Um, but yeah, so mixed economics is the reason why we have things like checks and balances. Okay, because power vacuums can be dangerous, and power imbalances can be very dangerous. Okay, but yeah, I guess later on in the series we're going to talk about what these philosophers were teaching and stuff. Um, Conservatism, we're going to omit some philosophers because they just kind of they're in the area of philosophy where you shouldn't and stuff, because then we're going to be talking about people like uh, what's called what's Giovanni Gentile and stuff, and his doctrine of fascism and stuff like that. Like that's yeah. So I don't need to explain why fascism doesn't need to be brought up. Okay. Um, Not only for historical reasons, but because it's a bunch of bunk. Okay. Which is another reason why right-wing ideologies tend to be bunk. So yeah, I think we covered everything and stuff, and we could talk about the history of these ideologies too. So all right, so there.